greenhouse people, and welcome to another installment of Tech on Demand, where our goal is always to bring you tips, tricks, and information to select and produce your best crops ever, or in this case, grow them with the highest profitability. I'm your host, Bill Calkins, and I'm happy to be joined by Stephen Steiner. He's been the senior business analyst at Ball Seed for more than 3 years. Stephen's currently pursuing his MBA with finance, marketing, and analytics concentrations at University of Chicago Booth School of Business, and he'll graduate next June. Prior to Ball, he was an empirical research fellow at Kellogg School of Management, assisting with academic research. Stephen, welcome.
Hey, good to be here, Bill. Thanks for having me.
So I'm always interested, what are you working on right now as an analyst? What's on your screens or in the collective mind of Ball Seed in the fall when it comes to analytics?
So right now, it's actually kind of apropos that we're having this conversation about planning for the season, because right now here at Ball, we're actually planning for next season. So I've been working with our supplier manager, Jessie McMillan, on our Ball Moms program and helping her forecast demand for the 2026 fall season.
Okay, so you're looking back at past data and current season and thinking about what next year might look at. That makes sense.
Yep.
And I know the company places a major focus on data with our own goals in mind, but also takes a collaborative approach with customers who need to be profitable to maintain the health of our industry and all the people and families involved. So I'm going to kick this off, and really just for reference, I looked at the definition of cost accounting, and I don't have a business degree, so I'm going to read the definition and then I'm going to let you jump in and dial it down to horticulture. So what I learned is it's a branch of accounting that focuses on recording, analyzing, and controlling costs that are associated with producing goods or providing service. And the main purpose is helping managers understand the cost structure of their business so they can make better decisions about pricing, budgeting, efficiency, and profitability. I hope that's a pretty accurate definition, but Stephen, I know you're going to dive deeper into this, so I'm going to keep quiet for a bit. I'll let you jump in. I might chime in with questions as you go, if that's okay.
Sure.
Cool?
Yeah. Right. Honestly, I think you kind of nailed it with the definition. I think we're all good here, probably.
Sounds good. So maybe you can start by explaining cost accounting specific to greenhouse production and management, and then really, I think the essence is why it's critical for owners and managers to be strategic when crunching the numbers. So, Stephen, the floor is all yours.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill. Yeah. So I think with cost accounting, the important thing is really just kind of like you had said, recording all of your costs, right? And that covers direct costs. So the typical, when you're actually planting something, right? So that's going to cover the plant material, the soil, pots, all that kind of stuff. But then the important thing with cost accounting is also factoring in decisions that are unrelated to production, right? So really you want to factor in the overhead of running your business, like your management costs, right? So that might include your, your employee salary, right? The fuel costs for heating your greenhouse, all of those things as well. So you want to factor that into your production decisions as well. And that's kind of where cost accounting comes in, because then through cost accounting, you can add all of those costs up together. You can identify activities that are, net drains on your business, right? And then identify opportunities to become more profitable, right? So like with a cost accounting activity, right? So it in the winter, it is costly to heat your greenhouse, right? So sure. One example for how cost accounting might be efficient is, it might help you identify a certain crop that is very costly to produce. You need to have a really long crop time, right? So then through cost accounting, you might identify that it makes more sense to purchase that unrooted cutting as a liner instead, so that you can save on those fuel costs and keep your greenhouse closed through February.
So it's taking into account things that you might not think of in like straight up greenhouse production, but that are impacting your costs, that can help you make better decisions on, like you said, maybe the inputs. And it might be counterintuitive to think that a liner is going to save you money versus growing from an unrooted cutting. But in some crops, when you really crunch the numbers, that's the case.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And liner is just one example, but even, drilling into that even further, right? you can, if through a liner, right, you might be able to reduce the amount of buffer that you need to have, right? In which case you are able to, you have fewer plants that you're just throwing into the trash because they never germed in the first place, right? So then you don't have that wasted bench space. And cost accounting will allow you to identify that wasted bench space as a net drain on your business, right? If you're just looking strictly at the input costs into a specific plant, then that does make it to retail. You're not including that opportunity cost of that wasted bench space, and you're not including you're not even considering really the fixed cost of operating that greenhouse through a really cold time of the year. So, and kind of diving into opportunity cost a little bit more. And I think that that's something that really, I mean, even, I might make accountants that are on the call, that are listening to this right now, might make them a little bit mad, because it's not, there's not a governing body that says, this is a wasted opportunity, right? That you're going to be charged for, right? So that a typical accountant isn't going to think about that. But opportunity cost is something that as managers, we need to think about when operating the greenhouse, right? Because when opportunity cost, as it relates to like my previous point, is that wasted bench space that you had planned to have a plant there, right? That is just wasted, right? There's nothing, you're not growing anything there. You're not going to make any money on it. It is just a net drain on your business, right? So, but if we're not incorporating those opportunity costs, right, you are not considering that foregone profitability. So if you can reduce the amount of buffer that you need to have on your benches, then you can actually take more plants to retail. You can save more bench space, and you can ultimately get more plants to retail, and that's going to drive profitability a lot more.
Okay, no, that all makes sense. I think that growers don't like to see empty greenhouses that are being heated.
Right.
They don't like to see empty greenhouses that are being underutilized. So no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
In fact, we can actually go through a quick example of opportunity cost.
Okay, yeah, no, I think an example of opportunity cost is good, and it'll be good for folks to see.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on this page, but ultimately, if we just kind of work our way around, right? In the top left corner, we've got this graph that is showing the plants that we need to actually sow if we have higher levels of shrink, right? So at 0% shrink, if we want to produce 100 plants, we only need to sow 100 seeds, right? But then if we want to produce, if we go all the way over to the right side, we have 20% shrink, right? So that means that we've got 20% of plants that are not making it to retail. Then that means that we need to we need to actually sow 125 seeds. So if we actually then translate that into the lost opportunity, the lost revenue that we are not seeing, right? That's what brings us over to the right side. So here we're looking at, let's suppose that we want to sell each of those plants at $10. So at 0% shrink, we're making $1,000. That's awesome, right? Problem is that as we start increasing shrink level, when we get all the way back up to 20% shrink, we're still making $1,000 because we're bringing 100 plants to retail, because that was part of our prediction plan, because we had incorporated that shrink. But the problem is that we actually could have made another $250, right? Because we had actually reserved that bench space for plants that ended up in the dumpster.
Okay.
So then we can actually calculate what our opportunity cost is per plant. So at 20% shrink, our shrink opportunity cost is $2 per plant on average. Because we're just taking, we can take the expected total lost revenue, and which is just taking the total possible revenue, which is $10 times 125 plants, right? Because we've got potential for getting revenue on 125 plants, but we're losing 20% of our crop, so that brings us to $250. And ultimately, because we had if we average that across all 125 plants that were planted, we get $2, right? So of that $10 sell price, we really need to consider that as kind of an $8, right? That we're making $8 because we lost $2 on average due to shrink because we were just not.
Well, it could be
It was just
efficiency. It could be, I mean, there
right,
could be all
exactly.
sorts of
Could be any
causes
number
for
of things,
shrink.
right? Could be any number of things, right? Maybe we just, we just had a batch of seed that had poor germ, right?
Right.
Or maybe we accidentally left the greenhouse window open, right? But the point is, that's $2 that we could have. That's $2 on average that we could have had we just been more efficient with our plants that we had sown.
Yeah, and I think with greenhouse crops, you cannot afford to lose that $2.
Right. But ultimately, if we start working through an example, right, let's suppose that we're considering like a 4-inch pot of bee's knees petunias, right? We've got the pots are being grown pot tight on the bench, and we've got 7,000 square feet of bench area, right? Then let's go through our fixed costs. So for our fixed costs, that means that these are costs that are not going to change with however many units that we produce, right? So in this case, right, if we have a 10,000 square foot greenhouse, right, if we only fill 3,000 square feet of bench area, we're still going to have to pay to heat that entire greenhouse, right? So that cost is fixed. And then considering like labor, right? If we still need to hire, we had already planned on hiring these people, so we're considering that as fixed as well, right? And so those are kind of fixed costs that are going into our production. And this is a pretty simple example. For your operation, you might have more fixed costs that you want to add into this, and we'll kind of go over where you can find that information. Actually, I think Bill has a link to the full presentation. This is kind of an abridged version that has that shows that where you can find these fixed costs itemized on your tax return information.
Yep, and I will put links to that in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Well, anyways, so we're just trying to keep this really simple. So we're really just going to be considering those two fixed costs, and then we're also going to look into the variable costs, which is just going to be incorporating the direct input costs into producing a plant. So that's going to include stuff like the plant material itself, pots, soil, tags, and then we're also going to look at shrink, which we had just talked about too. So starting off here, what we can see is that we're just doing kind of a horse race between URC versus a liner, right? We're still looking at this bee's knees petunia that we want to grow in a 4-inch pot. So but the crop time, and I think that this is important here, right? We want to sell this in week 18. The crop time, though, for URC is longer than the liner, right? But we're not incorporating that right now. We're just looking at the direct input costs. So this is what people who don't really aren't as familiar with cost accounting, this might be where you stop, right? Where you're just looking into the plant material cost, and then you're incorporating soil, pot, tags, and then you end up coming up with the average variable cost to produce a plant, right? So then if we start diving a little bit deeper into the costs that we've got here, also incorporating with URC, probably have to transplant that URC from a tray into a pot, right? So we're increasing the cost of the soil, pot, and tags, right? Because you have to pay for the tray, and then you have to fill the tray with soil before transplanting it, right? So it's a little bit more expensive, but ultimately what we're coming up with here for average variable cost, URC is $2.25 versus a liner, which is $2.50, right? So we're actually seeing that liner here, when we're just looking at the direct input costs, liner's more expensive. Mm-hmm. But then we start looking at shrink, right? So with URC, we're not going to be as successful in rooting those URC, right? So if we assume that shrink, we're going to lose 10% of our URC crop versus only 2% of our liner crop, then we can incorporate the average. We can incorporate the shrink cost, right? So using the same methodology that we had before, right, we can just look at what our intended retail price was. So our intended retail price here, $6, right? So with the intended retail price of $6, we can calculate the lost revenue on average as just taking that $6 times the estimated shrink. So in this case for URC, $6 times 10%, we're losing 60 cents on average per URC planted. So then similarly with liners, if we do the same calculation, then we can see that 2% times that $6 retail price, we're only losing 12 cents on average, right? So that's a 12 cents of opportunity lost per plant that we sell at retail. But the thing is, now that even before we incorporate our fixed costs, right? Well, only when we're looking at the direct input costs and the opportunity costs, we can already see that the math is flipped, right? Mm-hmm. So with URC now, we're at $2.85 versus a liner, which is now $2.62 once we've incorporated this opportunity cost. So already before we've actually included the fixed costs, we're seeing that liners come out as relatively less expensive, right? Or at least more profitable. So now when we incorporate the fixed costs, this is important too, because the fixed costs, when we're actually incorporating these costs, URC, especially if we're in Michigan, right? As in this example, we are, right? Winters are cold. Right. So we are paying to heat our greenhouse at the most expensive time of the year. So that means that we are increasing our fuel costs. And then on top of that, we've actually got to pay our laborers a lot more to come out and sow those cuttings and maintain our greenhouse, right? So now so if we take all of that, right, we can, let's just say that our total fixed costs when we're looking at URC is $26,600 versus $17,300, right? Then if we average that across all of the plants that we want to produce, which in this case, we want to produce 63,000 plants, average fixed cost comes out to be 42 cents per plant for URC versus 27 cents per plant for liners. So ultimately, our average total cost for URC is $3.27 versus $2.89.
Which is significant. I mean, really, when you look
at that, it's a huge difference. It's a huge difference.
All the additional fixed costs, the shrink potential. That's actually a pretty staggering number there.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. And so ultimately that brings our profitability up by nearly 14% just by going through all of these line items and just by reducing the amount of time that we have our greenhouse open, that we have people operating our greenhouse, right? We're actually saving a significant amount of money. And that ultimately, that's the power of cost accounting, right? And it's something that you can even do. It's really powerful, even if you keep it as general as this. I think one thing, especially if you're just starting to dive into it, it can be a little overwhelming just thinking about all of the costs that are going into your production. You don't have to really itemize it. You don't really have to, it can be as powerful as you want it to be, right? Or as detailed as you need it to be. Ultimately, you're just using this to make better decisions for your organization, and your organization better than anybody else. Mm-hmm. So take it as far as you need to go, and then in your first season, take it as far as you need it to go, and then maybe in the next season, try a little bit more to itemize even further, right? So if it's just easier for you to look at anything that's not a direct input cost, and just have a sum total of all the fixed costs, all of the overhead that it takes to run your organization. Just have that, right? And average it across your production, and then take that as your average fixed cost. And then maybe in the future, right, the next season, you can itemize that. You can work on itemizing that and recording all of those different activities that are going into those fixed costs so that you can identify what exactly of those fixed costs you can reduce to improve profitability.
So it occurs to me when you think about this crawl, walk, run approach that you'll see pretty dramatic numbers in the crawl approach that'll probably inspire you to dig in a little bit deeper, because all these numbers are available to really anyone who's running a greenhouse. You just have to take the time to pick them out and do some fairly simple calculations. I mean, these charts that you're showing have like 6-7 lines. They're not, it's not volumes of information needed, and the information that comes out of them can really be I mean, more than just directional. They can really change everything, that you're looking at in the numbers side.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it can completely change, how you are, production timelines. It can change how quick your crop is turning, right? So, I mean, in this case, we shaved off 4 weeks, right? But
Hmm.
you can imagine if you were to pick out a larger cell liner, right, and
Right.
you reduced your crop time down to 6 weeks. So we're going from 12 to 6. So really, you can actually have 2 crop turns. So
Oh,
then you're
okay.
you're bringing even more plants to retail than you would have had you just sown the URC yourselves and waited for them to root.
No, that's great.
So
Anything
yeah,
else?
I mean, these are all things that cost accounting allows you to do and allows you to identify those opportunities to become more profitable. Yeah.
I like it. I like it. Is there anything else you want to share today before we wrap up?
I mean, nothing comes to mind. I think I just want to highlight again, with all of the materials that Bill's going to have in the show notes. I would recommend just kind of flipping through some of them, and it offers a really great guideline. I mean, thankfully, Grower Talks. This has been something that Grower Talks has really pushed for a long time, and there's a series of Grower Talks articles that talk about cost accounting from industry leaders. So I would really recommend just checking those out and starting it, just giving it a shot. It's something that Bill, like you said, it's not, these tables are pretty straightforward, right? So if you
Mhm.
can at least just start with some simple calculations, I think that you guys will find that it is a very valuable exercise, and you'll be able to convince yourself very shortly that it's worth going a little bit further every year and recording even more information and figuring out what you can do to just make your operation more efficient.
And even if for those of you listening, even if it's not your thing, I bet you can find someone in your operation who will get excited and energized by this because there are definitely folks out there that love this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Speaking as
Stephen,
one of those people who love that kind of thing, I know people around the office who don't like around the office here at Ball, right? They don't really like diving in as much as I do.
Mhm.
I mean, this stuff makes me bounce around the room because I get so passionate about it, right? I'm more than
That's
happy to
cool.
talk about it. So yeah, I'm sure that you guys can find somebody in your organization too to pick that up as well.
Well, and that's why we're lucky to have you. So,
Oh,
thank you so
stop
much, Stephen.
it!
I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah, no
That
problem.
It was really a lot of fantastic information in a short period of time, and I know from some of your past presentations at Ball Seed events that this kind of information is very much appreciated, especially this day and age when we have to really maximize profitability to keep businesses healthy. And like Stephen said, before we close, I want to remind all the listeners and viewers that this full presentation on greenhouse cost accounting and like Steven said, a slew of Grower Talks articles and additional resources are available on the Ball Seed website. I'll put links to all these resources in the show notes. And as always, if you have any questions, reach out to the Ball Seed team. Reach out to your Ball Seed sales rep. Reach out to a ColorLink representative. They will point you in the right direction, connect you with people at Ball Seed who can help you with this. And as I mentioned at the beginning, profitability throughout the entire supply chain is critical to the health and longevity of our industry. So, Stephen, once again, thank you. And on behalf of the entire Ball Seed team, I'm Bill Calkins with Tech on Demand, wishing you a profitable 2026.